no idea.
Look, I really do only have one accent. It's just if it's foreign, I use that, or if it's like Southern, I have that.
So is there a point to this?
Yes.
Okay.
If I may make a suggestion, we're going to speak about your very fashionable shoes and socks.
Oh, thank you. I got these very cheap in a factory shop.
Let's start.
Let's start. Let's do it.
All right. So there we go. It's starting.
Do you have to post that link?
No, you don't. Nathan, don't try to get on right there. You're going to confuse me.
I was just trying to. I don't know how to use
Yes.
it.
I'm going to welcome people, Tony.
Have you done this before?
No. All right. So, hello, Homebrew Christianity listeners. This is Tripp, and I am with Peter Rollins, who has just boxed his soap up and handed it out to people in Redondo Beach. And then Tony Jones explained to them how he's surprised that I made a joke that he doesn't like it this fast and early in the podcast. Tony Jones then explained to them what the world's really like if you're not Irish or famous.
Yeah, the real world.
I like the fact that it's either famous like Rob Bell or Irish. I mean, can I not be both, you know? It's like you're either really good like Rob Bell
or you're a funny little leprechaun.
Yeah, he puts his hand through his hair all the time.
Yeah,
You're just jealous.
I was.
Hey, I've got a project too. We've all got projects.
Anyways, so this is the first time we use Blab, and that does mean that after we get going, random people that are watching can post like they want to ask something, and then they can show up on, and then we have to answer whatever question they ask.
I see one call in right now.
It's theology roulette.
Wow.
So we'll see. But St. Paul UCC wants to ask a question. Do you trust St. Paul UCC? Let's see how this goes. Their God is still speaking because they had the
big comma.
Uh-oh.
Oh! They hung up.
We got hung up on. I'm hurt.
Wow. What did they say? Was that
dude.
I've got interpretation.
Oh, let's hear it.
It's everyone should buy The Divine Magician. Wow, that's weird. That is weird.
Tim said accept his thing.
All right, we'll accept him, but then he's going to... Tim!
Oh, yeah.
That's working.
What's up?
How you doing?
Whoa, you're louder than I am. I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
That's what I like to see. Or do you have a question or something? Or
Where are
did
you
just
speaking
call?
from?
I just wanted to say that this is now a simulcast from 2 different rooms at Hatchery LA.
All right. Thank you, Tim. I'm kicking you off. All right. So this Isaiah. All right, let's see this. This should be...
He's here.
Well, now he's going to be on the screen. Maybe. He doesn't know yet. He's discussing whether or not he's going to be on the screen. What's up? You got... Oh, my God!
Crazy.
Okay,
It's like when the people calling the rate back in the old days. They're like, "Turn off your radio."
That is crazy.
Listen,
If they want to ask a question, they can go over there.
Yeah, go over
How
there
about
if
you
you want
just
to
ask
ask.
a freaking question live?
We do this
You're in the
every
same group
Tuesday and
as us.
Thursday with John. Every Tuesday and
Oh
Thursday.
my God.
So,
I'm supposed to be doing an event about how to be professional at public speaking things, and this is what we're doing in the evening time.
but remember at the end, we were going to say, like, and just think, it couldn't be worse than this. So go ahead and put your best foot forward.
Yeah, if I can be a professional and this is what we do, then so can you. Yeah, there you go. That's the message.
But in order to find that out, you need to fly out to Redondo Beach. So, I'm interested. First question is, I want to know each of you's worst early speaking experience. Like, you completely bombed. You considered ending all that is good and holy about your life, and you like I sharded once early in my speaking career, and
We've all sharded. You mean while you were speaking?
yes,
What?
yeah, and Doug Padgett
This is not therapy.
Doug Padgett had just introduced me at the first Sustainable Faith Conference, and it was like 2010 or something. This is the first time anyone had like really asked me to do something where I got paid. And but the night before, I had celebrated significantly with the college students that were there, and I was 26 or something. And it was the first time I realized I was not like 21 anymore. And I was starting, and I'd had lots of coffee, wake myself up, and I thought, I should just let this go right now. And it went blip, blip, blip. And Doug started dancing the microphone, and the whole time I'm thinking, I crap pants. And I have never told anyone that.
Wow. Wow. You're getting a lot of high fives for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Can you top that one?
I'll tell two stories. I can't top that one, I don't think. I'll tell a story about me, and then I'll tell a story about my youth pastor that's even better. So I got booked to speak to like all the Methodist teenagers in Eastern Tennessee. It was in Nashville, the Nashville Convention Center. If you've ever stayed, I think the hotel's the DoubleTree that's connected to the Nashville Convention Center. So I'm staying there, and like I'm the keynote speaker for their big weekend, midwinter, all these Methodist teenagers. 1,500 kids, probably the biggest crowd at that point of my career. Probably still to this point. Okay, so
tell this Blab.
this is like, if anybody knows like my own life trajectory and stories, this is in like January 2009. Okay, so like a pretty terrible time in my life. And I'm having some back problems. And as I'm walking this long corridor, there's a long like covered walkway from the DoubleTree to the convention center in Nashville. And by the time I get to the convention center and I'm backstage, I cannot feel my left leg. And I call my brother, who's a surgeon in Oregon, and I'm like, so I've been having these back problems. I have a herniated disc. I'm supposed to go see a surgeon next week. I can't feel my left leg. And he said, oh my God, go to the emergency room. Like, this is really, really bad. You have like serious nerve damage. There are 1,500 Methodist teenagers out there. And so I can't even stand up. They have to bring me out in a wheelchair. And I speak Friday night and twice on Saturday in a wheelchair. Okay?
Like Dave Grohl.
Yeah, exactly. But I did not go viral. Like I didn't pull it off like Dave Grohl. I did do this though. I like frantically at the last minute, I found a picture of a syringe and I had them put it up on the screen. And I gave this like 10-minute long description of getting a cortisone shot in my spine for my back problems. And kids were like screaming, passing out because I was talking about this. Okay, so that's the story. That was pretty terrible. And but here's a better story from my youth pastor. So he was very, very creative. We can hear ourselves from the other room. Echoing. He was a very creative youth pastor, and we went on a Colorado ski trip, and so there were like 5 nights of talks, and it was like, be a superhero for Jesus. And he had rented all these costumes. So the first night he comes out, he's Indiana Jones, and he's got like the whip, and so he gives his talk that night to like a couple hundred high school kids as Indiana Jones, right? And like, the whip and the whatever.
Did he have someone come out and say, cover your heart?
I mean, I can't remember because all I can remember is the next night he came out and he was dressed as Batman. And he comes out and they're playing the Batman like the old TV theme. Yeah. And he comes running out and he grabs the mic to start his talk, and Mike Colby is sitting in the front row and he's like, hey, look, it's the Bat Pole. And the place, and it was like, because it was a skin tight Batman costume.
Okay.
The place lost it. People were like crying. There were kids. He runs off stage and comes back. He's like he's got like gym shorts on over his Batman costume, and gives the whole talk with like gym shorts on. You maybe would have thought of that before you came out.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I've told some of my worst. Although no, Tony had great joy in opening up your talk.
I was at your worst.
He was at a really bad one, but we talked about it. But I actually preferred the story about a friend of mine who shall remain unknown. It was Gareth Higgins. I told you a story earlier, but for the sake of the people watching Blab, the 4 people, my favorite talk opening was when my friend at this
36.
Oh yeah,
36.
It's my biggest.
Wait,
audience.
that's more than people bought your last book.
Yeah. Wow.
Until tonight.
Yeah, I was part of this charismatic church, 1,000 people, big kind of mega church in Ireland. And this guy starts off with this opening. The lights go down. The PA system starts. It hums into life. You hear the Darth Vader kind of theme tune, dun, 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 like this. And then the Death Star appears. You have this massive battle. The TIE fighters is from Return of the Jedi. The Death Star explodes. And then he walks up. This is a massive screen in this mega church. And he walks up, he takes the mic, and he does this talk for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And he comes and sits beside me. And I'm like, that was a great talk, but why the hell did you have the Death Star blowing up? And he's like, damn, he forgot to mention anything about it. So basically, you had a massive explosion of the Death Star. You had him coming up to the Darth Vader theme tune. You know, all of this, the lights coming up, and never mentioned it once. So that is brilliant. That is pretty damn cool. And that was Gareth Higgins. If you ever meet him. Yeah.
He has a film podcast.
He has a film podcast, that's right. Is he still doing that?
They
Oh, that sounds terrible. What? No, I thought he stopped it. I'm not saying anything bad. That's great.
Is this how you're going to talk about me, your former roommates?
He is a former. You know what? He had an Eeyore, and I hung him once with piano wire, and had a sign stuck to the Eeyore saying, "Next time it will be you." He took it really bad. It turns out that Eeyore was like this childhood toy, and it was like his power animal or some crazy shit. And yeah, so he never really forgave me for that.
Like that time we were playing Nerf, and the barrier painted and built by Elgin's grandfather that you just ran over and broke.
Yeah,
and didn't understand why someone, a 6-year-old playing Nerf, might be disappointed that you just
upset. Yes,
you broke it.
Yeah,
painted Nerf barrier. Every time he sees it broken, he's like, I wonder when Pete's going to fix that.
Yeah. This is the primary reason I moved out of actually the house with Tripp. Is like Elgin just wanted to have Nerf battles every night. I was kind of getting sick just getting hit by Nerf bullets. So, yeah. Anyway, that's more theology.
Well,
the questions are coming thick and fast.
Remember the Alamo. Any idea?
Oh
yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to see Chris in San Antonio in November.
By the way,
if you live in San Antonio,
future,
come see me in November.
In the future, when someone asks, "What was your worst live speaking event?" I think I've got a new winner. Most embarrassing live event.
Well, look, here's the thing. I was thinking when you said that about the spandex outfit. Like in high school and college, I was in a Christian rock band, and we would play lots of concerts and stuff. And just because I'm not necessarily more of like Meatloaf style front man,
yes,
but I got moves like Jagger. So we were doing this big Christian battle of bands, and we get there and realize there are like 10 bands in the finals, 9 Christian hardcore bands like screaming about like Revelation. They're like, Jesus has kicked the shit out of me, like that kind of stuff. And then we're playing like pop rock. Well, I know we're not going to win because you're getting voted on. So I decided I was going to be like all gangster and hardcore. And I climbed up on the speaker and went to jump off. And I ripped the inside of my pants.
Did you also shark?
No. But I then had to like play the guitar like this because like I like whitey tighties and there's
you don't.
large amounts of just hairy thigh hanging out while we're playing this song, and I thought I'm gonna win this junk.
Do you know what I'm feeling great? You know what I'm feeling great about right now, Pete?
Well, that we look good in front of him.
That I signed a 10-book deal for Homebrew Christianity.
Oh.
It's a very reputable academic publication.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Well, anyway, so
do you want to explain? Is this going to actually be a homebrew podcast
at some point?
No.
Do you want to talk about what soapbox is, or are you going to do that in your intro?
We can do it right now.
Why don't we let Pete talk about?
Hold on, Joseph is going to say something.
Why he gathered? Oh, let's let Joseph.
Joseph's a good guy.
Yep.
He's
freestyle.
Hello,
Hey, go freestyle
friends.
Hey.
If you haven't listened to the freestyle podcast, do it.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, look, my baby woke up.
Oh, what time is it there in Sweden?
It's like 5 o'clock or something.
That's totally a move to make us like you. That's terrible. You're using your child
I'm gonna
purely
give
as
him
a
high fives.
cynical move to make you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but I have a question
Yes.
Yes.
because tomorrow I've been up late because tomorrow I'm going to speak to Jeffrey Robbins,
Oh.
and so I was asking Pete about the future of radical theology
Oh.
because Jeff talks about radical theology coming of age, and I was thinking maybe Pete can tell me what that means to him.
Wow. Jeff's a great guy, by the way. Jeff Robinson, great author, great person, wonderful. Yeah, well, what that means to me is anybody who knows about radical theology, and I hope that not too many people know about it, so that if people knew exactly what we were doing, we'd be out of business. But radical theology became very in the 60s. In the 60s, there was this what?
The gooing baby.
Yeah.
That's just Pete's
How
stomach.
can I compete with a child? This is not fair.
Well, it's
Look
kind of
at
even.
look at the baby. Yeah.
She doesn't like the
Radical
answer so far,
theology come
Pete.
of age.
Came of age. Well, no, radical theology really was born in the 1960s. Paul Tillich was on the front page of Time magazine. Is God Dead was the.
Were you speaking?
This is when everyone was talking
No,
theology.
Jay Baker is super into what you're talking about right now.
Yeah. No, you know what? But that was probably Paul Tillich was probably the last public theologian. He was genuinely probably the last public theologian. People were talking about him in the cafes, in the bars, buses. He was selling out stadiums. They were talking about him across the disciplines. If you want to be a public theologian, you're talked about in sociology and philosophy and across the humanities and the sciences. Paul Tillich was massive. And then, strangely, the religious rights they were much more politically astute. Thomas Altizer, who was one of the big movers and shakers in radical theology, who was also, I think, front page in Time magazine. He also had a Time magazine article. In fact, he was the Is God Dead. Both Paul Tillich and Altizer both were on Time when that meant something.
Are you saying when Rob Bell was in Time, it no longer meant something?
Oh, well, yeah, because it's easy. Everyone gets in Time as 100 most influential people in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, you can only kill God once.
Yeah. But this is a time everyone all sides of BBC were making documentaries about him. It was massive, but they weren't very good at galvanizing a movement at all. We can talk about why, but they couldn't galvanize the movement. The religious right came in, and this kind of radical, kind of immanentist theology kind of died a death. And interestingly, in recent years, it's been coming back, and I've always kind of felt that it didn't have its day in the sun. I felt that it was smothered before it really had a chance to get into real churches, real communities, touching real lives. And I think what Jeff's talking about is with people like Chris Rodkey, Jeff Robinson, kind of some of the work that Kester Bruin is doing, and Catherine Sarah Moody, Clayton Crockett. There's this revival that bringing back the potentiality that never fully saw the light of day in the 1960s. So Slavoj Žižek's very important to this narrative. He single-handedly kind of brought radical theology back into the academy.
What do you think? Like radical theology, almost like it was like a bacteria that hid out in some frozen stuff but didn't die, namely the academy. What do you think it looks like? Like, where would it find traction in actual communities, or is radical theology come of age, or the age of radical theology necessarily like marginal?
Well, if you define radical theology the way John Caputo defines it, which is a really interesting way, for him, radical theology is not an alternative to confessional theology. He says radical theology is that which disturbs, disrupts, and haunts confessional theology. You know all this, but so radical theology can't become something. Otherwise, then something would have to haunt that. So by definition, whatever. So if you're a very conservative denomination, what haunts that? The questions that haunt that will be very different from a progressive congregation, very different from other congregations. So whatever it is that haunts, that kind of like disturbs and disrupts radical theology. But there is also a tradition of radical theology that has concrete form. That has a genealogy from Hegel and Tillich, Altizer, through to some contemporary thinkers. Like even Bonhoeffer, I think, is an important radical theologian, although that's debatable. So in that term, in one sense, if radical theology is just what haunts confessional theology, then it can never become something. Otherwise, it has to be haunted. But of course, everything takes concrete form. And so for me, the next iteration of the church, what I'm putting my money on, all my money on, is a kind of a form of radical theology, a form of immanentist theology.
I had in the next issue, the November-December issue of Books and Culture, I have a review of Stanley Hauerwas's newest book. It's called The Work of Theology. And there's an interesting, it's just a collection of essays, really. And it's interesting, in one essay, Hauerwas says he was confronted by a guy who said, well, if your theology is so potent and you're Time Magazine called him the greatest American theologian in like 2003. And I say in the beginning of the book, like, that's like being called the greatest Zeppelin pilot in 1931 or whatever.
That's
like you're at
that's a good line.
right?
That's a good line.
It's something like that. Like, hey, you're the greatest Zeppelin pilot in the world.
Yeah.
But he says, oh, that's such a bullshit question. Where are all the Hauerwasian churches? It's just such a bullshit question. And then he said somebody gave him a book by on the whole missional emerging church by Frost and Hirsch, and he quit reading it after the first chapter because it was the most terrible book he's ever written, and it used the word impactful. And he just like totally mocks this book and says, and so he thinks it's a bullshit question, and I disagree. I think it's a very important question. And so I wonder this about Hauerwasian theology. I wonder this about radical theology, and I've wondered this publicly about process theology. Like, if it's such a potent vision of the Christian faith, why hasn't it caught on with any churches? Where is the movement of, there are Presbyterian churches and Methodist churches and evangelical and Pentecostal. Like, it's not like there's any dearth. It's not like in the American ecosystem of churches, a little posse of radical theology churches or process theology churches couldn't start up. And I rarely meet pastors who are like, I'm hardcore process theology. Like, that's my thing.
Well, radical theology is potentially at the moment, and I think it can happen within the church. That's what I'm thinking. But at the moment, it's happening mostly outside the church. I mean, most of the kind of people who are dealing with radical theology at the moment.
I agree. In academic conferences.
Yeah, no, but they're also incredibly popular. You know, some of them are. Like people like Alain Badiou and Slavoj Žižek are like, they are massive.
When you say incredibly popular, I'm wondering exactly what you mean by that, compared to, say, Joyce Meyer or Joel Osteen.
Oh, no.
Because I'd be happy to look up the Amazon rankings on their books. I get what you're
but
saying.
They're influencing politics. They're influencing movements like Joel Osteen.
So is Joel Osteen and Joyce Meyer. They are
using different hair products. You got it. The radical theologians use different hair products than Joyce.
I don't use any hair products.
Zizek uses, I don't know.
You use Irish.
He must be rubbing lotion on his face.
Jeff Robbins has very stylish.
Let me ask
He's
this.
very- he's
let-
very
He's trying to
He
answer
looks
Joseph's
good.
question.
Here's a question that was just texted to me by somebody in the room. What's the good news? What's the good news of radical? And I love you, and I'm asking. I'm like, I want a non-bullshit answer. I want like a no. You know what I'm saying? Like I want I want some feet on the ground, concrete.
Feet on the ground.
Concrete, somewhat channel your inner practical theologian for a minute.
Yeah.
What's the good
Where's
news of radical theology for the marginalized, the voiceless, people of color, Black Lives Matter? If you went to that, I know Zizek went to Occupy Wall Street and had the bullhorn.
No. Zizek grew up in communist country
I know.
and was being still, I think, is often being observed, but like secret police.
I'm not challenging you. I'm giving you an
He's a
opportunity.
burn
Like,
phone, you know?
what's the good news? Like, make that walk across that bridge for us on the radical theology side, and then the process theology side.
Okay. Well, the whole reason why I got into radical theology was because of its political potential. I mean, I bullshit you not. The Northern Ireland, when I growing up in Northern Ireland, was a conflict zone. It was a war zone. 3,000 people killed. It was like there's more peace walls in Northern Ireland than I think anywhere else in Europe. There's peace walls that cut a park in half. I mean, it was a violent place. And radical theology for me was always political theology. And so my influences were people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was executed by the Nazis. Paul Tillich, who left Germany, went to America, but then was firing in radio broadcasts into Nazi Germany in order to kind of convince the German Christians to resist Hitler. Now, of course, John Caputo was also a big influence in American, but for me, it was always a political theology. But it was different from liberation theology, which for me was still a lot of liberation theology was very doctrinal and very orthodox in many ways. So although it was about, for example, the economically poor, if you were sexually marginalized, if you were gay or something like that, it was like, do you want to go there? Because it was largely Catholic at the time. The liberation theology was very Catholic. So I was more influenced by, I thought radical theology could be more liberating than liberation theology. And we used radical theology in Northern Ireland in a Republican bar, with IRA bar, which there was an IRA arms spine in it. We had to shut down and go somewhere else to look at breaking down religious tribal identities, embracing doubt, ambiguity, complexity. How do we engage with the other? So one of our decentering practices was the evangelism project. We go to other communities to let them evangelize us, to let them transform us. These were all political moves in a context that was violent.
Couldn't that, though, what you did at Icon in Belfast, couldn't that, isn't a possible critique of that you were still a fairly privileged group? As somebody who could say, we have the ability to go to another community and say, like you still feel some kind of powerful self-identity if you can go to another community and say, evangelize us into your way of thinking. So to the truly marginalized, like what's the good news of radical theology to somebody who feels really powerless in our culture today?
So in the Northern Irish context, I mean, we were working in working class areas, and we're working with and so a lot of the people who went to Icon were kind of working in those destitute. Now, to be honest, I can't say that Icon has played some big part in the peace process or anything like that. Of course not. But we, definitely at that community of like 100 people coming and going, a huge percentage were deeply involved in very grassroots work living in working class areas. I was living in a working class area. I was on the like, of of course, I also had an education, so I wasn't working class in some respects. I had a PhD, but I was living in a loyalist estate. I'm working actually in a Republican area with the homeless, with the signing community, which was fine. I don't think I was ever in any real danger, but that is kind of crazy to live in a loyalist area and work in a Republican area. It's kind of dodgy. I was kind of at the time, when you're young, you feel invincible, you know. So I do think it has liberating potential, and that's like people know me in America, and so they think, oh, you're a speaker, and how does this work in oppressed areas? I'm going, actually, before I came to America, I was a small part of a community for 11 years doing this in practice. But sadly, people don't know that about me because the only thing they know about me is my books. And they're like, I'm so about real community and politically marginalized areas. Now, how it's going to look in America, that's different. I'm still learning. But this grew up in Northern Ireland.
I mean, I know from I'll say this from as a testimonial, that both of you guys, the theologies that you embrace, you've practiced with me over the last 12 months, an extraordinary compassionate friendship and loyalty that I think is birthed out of what you believe. So I think it lends itself to that compassionate kind of love and embrace of the other. I'm not challenging that point.
Oh yeah, no, and I know you're not, but it's a great question, and if I sound like I'm trying to bat it away, that's
no, you're not,
because it's a great question. So how do our theologies?
So now what's the gospel to truly marginalized and powerless people from a process theology perspective? What's the good news? That process.
I mean, I think there's a couple different things, but when it goes straight to the doctrine of God, that almost every other Christian theology defines God's power either by choosing not to act or by limiting God's self. Like even if you answer the problem of evil, suffering, and injustice, and you don't, and you posit, like Moltmann, there was a time where God was omnipotent and could choose to undo it, then God's hands are behind God's back in some sense. And the process understanding of God's power and relationship to the world is both hands in. And they're cruciform-shaped hands. And so all suffering and injustice and things, God is present in and with it, and God is invested in it to bring whatever is possible out of it. But I think underneath it is that the God not only wants something to be better, but shares in all of it. So like we had a big conference at Claremont with the kind of second generation of liberation theologians and process. And the two biggest kind of pushbacks are, one, eschatological assurance, which is when you give up, God can eventually go, hit reset or whatnot. And God is all in all. Are you saying, in a sense, that God's dream for the world may not come to be? And some of them, the piety is attached to that type of power. And process people kind of just have to say, well, so is everyone that's an oppressor and oppressed. Notion of God attached to that type of power. And that criticism of the cycle of oppressed and oppressor, victim and violator being attached to an omnipotent interventionist power is a problem Moltmann identified, feminists identified, then ecofeminists have connected to. If you just check like the origins of like feminist movement, ecofeminist movement, those are places, lots of them are trained by process theologians. So like I think for process, the issue when it goes into liberation theologies is eschatology versus
okay. And I get it. I mean, I get it because that's the world I live in. It's the world of the academy and ecofeminist theology, but God bless them. Ecofeminist theology is still a very privileged place. These are people with PhDs and tenured chairs of theology. And I've also worked, as I know you guys have too, and probably a lot of people in this room and a lot of people who are listening, like I've lived on Native American reservations. I've visited places around the world that are like incredible poverty, structural poverty. And I don't know that the people I've met, and I come from a very privileged place, but I've I can see faces and think of names of people I've met, and probably a lot of people have. The message that God is not omnipotent, or the message that when the veil is torn, there's no God behind the veil. I don't know that. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I think that's a tough sell.
Well,
in those
issue is pretty
situations.
theological. Like what question or anxiety that drives your theological thinking? Like social science can go ahead and tell you what answers you will or won't like. And until you are moved up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you do not have permission to ask certain questions that do relate to certain answers. Like, that's not a judgment of one being better or worse. It's just factually the case. So John Sabrina wrote an article where he even explained why base communities functioned a lot of the ways they did. Was to explain liberation theology would have been offensive to the very people developing it, because they didn't live in material situations that gave them permission to recognize this. Now, this isn't an odd thing to recognize. Marx talks about this. So does Adam Smith. If you read his Ethics, by the way, he recognized that the distribution of wealth greatly impacts the way one is able to think long-term, to think expanded, interconnected. And as long as you always have your threat, the threat of not being finitude, not eating, the threat of staying in line, the anxiety of meeting demands of the dominant cultures so that you keep your place and spot in the world, like those things are imagination dwarfing. And I don't think it's a value judgment as much to say like, then it's less, do you want to tell them your theology or do you want to communicate to them based on the questions
you're
they're
saying
asking?
you're saying if somebody is struggling to even find enough food to feed their family, they don't have even the bandwidth for the second order discourse that is theological reflection on the nature of God's omnipotence.
Yeah, and what's the other part? Jesus didn't ever talk to them about that when that was the issue. Like Jesus did, that was not like you know, Zacchaeus, you have exploited them by overtaxation. But while we're redistributing the wealth, I'd like for you to recognize that while identifying you as the son of Abraham because of this newfound generosity, you're going to be able to equip them to spend more time investigating the Torah and realize that you were the only one here that recognized what is called theft in Deuteronomy is what you were doing. And you knew that because you overprivileged all like that's just not how he operated. And so I think that like for example, you can operate as a process person in a church and never deny your theology, but just never have to you don't have to sit and teach them things. I actually think a lot of Christian piety intuits things that are process. They don't think about it.
And can I go a different angle? Just very quickly throw in. If you believe in false consciousness, that's a big if you believe in the unconscious false, that you can, think you're free when you're actually part of a system that is very corrosive to you and other people, then you can say, well, yeah, there are certain theologies that one thinks helps. And Joel Osteen or something like that, you can go. But if you believe in false consciousness, then you go into this idea that certain views of God do feel within a certain ideological context very freeing and very wonderful and very brilliant, but actually they mimic maybe something very destructive about our society, American dream or something like that. And actually, the whole thing of actually looking at your suffering and encountering your trauma, realizing that you're alienated, that you're in an environment in which you're being exploited, and that you have to probably band together with other people to try to fight for real change in your community, like Black Lives Matter, what you see there. If you believe in false consciousness and that stuff, then you can actually say, there are theologies that the majority of people will go, that's much better. Oh my God. So it's like psychoanalysis. So you're telling me that I can be happy, be rich, and have my dreams fulfilled, right? That's right. You're telling me that I have to realize that fulfilling my dreams would be terrible, because then I'd realize that those dreams cover over a sense of lack and trauma that I really have to deal with. No, I'll stick with that. So what I'm saying is radical theology is that. Radical theology believes in false consciousness and says that some of the traditional views of God will be appealing to those parts of ourselves that want to run from our suffering. But radical theology says, sadly, you have to deal with your ghosts and look at real political and social justice issues.
Well, and the thing that people have often like had the conversation like why for someone who has very different metaphysics than Pete do you get along and talk about certain things, or like why are you regularly engaging in kind of social Trinitarians and eschatological theologians when process people have this particular issue with it? But the thing that actually holds all three things in common, if you just pause the metaphysical thing but talk about the phenomenological experience of religion, both of them prioritize the possible over the actual. Both of them shift the transcendent to the immanent plane, so that when you are operating religiously, the assumption is the world as it is isn't final, and the world as it will be, could be, is calling, whatever the hell you want to put in the blank. A surplus of possibility that's there phenomenologically says wherever situation you're in, our globe's in, our medical, physical situation, the economic situation, our world as it is isn't final, and is both judged and given grace to become something new. And like that phenomenological experience of religion, I think, coheres with the liberation theologians. And for me to say that people that don't share the upper middle class, overeducated white experience should necessarily agree with my metaphysical account of it is problematic. Now, I think it's right, and if you want to argue about it, we can. I totally would go there, but I don't feel like when it's not the place, my situated knowledge is mine in my community, and I feel more comfortable using it there than to see someone else who has already switched religious phenomenology to that prophetic material form, and then tell them, yeah, I'm going to fill in the metaphysical situation for you. And I feel like there's such resonance when you've shifted it from a transcendent to an immanent plane that, like, that's the radical move.
And I can do something so there's a lot of similarity there. My simple move, just to clarify for anyone who's listening, how many are listening?
We have 63.
Up to 63.
Up to
Maybe.
63. Hey, we're growing. They're probably growing faster than Mormonism at the moment. But it's very simply that my argument is that Christianity as purist and what Christ was about was exposing false consciousness and helping us confront the real kind of issues in our lives individually and communally. And that's what I'm arguing that faith and religion does, and that's what I argue radical theology does. It's not this metaphysical craziness or anything like that. It's about exposing false consciousness and helping to galvanize us to embrace the world, a life before death, and political transformation. Simple.
I mean, it's your podcast. I didn't mean to take it over.
No, he's taking
But I thought
over.
that was pretty damn. I think that was some of the best shit of 2015 on the Homebrew podcast. That's what I think.
Surprisingly, it's
What
what
they
he has
did
to
it by
push.
his crotch.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Look, we
The
don't.
big hairy thighs.
You
I
know,
don't think
everyone
so.
has dreams. They don't all have yours, Tim. And
Thanks, Joseph, for
He's
like,
gone.
Yeah, he's
The
gone.
baby's- the baby's
He went to
back to
bed with his
sleep.
baby.
Yeah.
he's like, it's 5 a.m. All right. So the
We have an open seat. We have an open seat for someone to.
we have only had people accidentally get on. Come on, Gregory. You're sitting there leaving messages. You should actually get on so we can.
We can ask a live question as well.
I know, but I don't see anyone like jumping at the gun.
But someone can put their hand up.
Otherwise,
Well,
I'm going to tell you another story about the time I.
Oh no!
So who killed Jesus?
Can I tell you what my criticism of Tony's?
I think I have to actually go to the bathroom right about
Is that right? Do you actually need to, or are you just too scared
now. I
of
actually
being
do need
beaten
to, but I think I'll
by
wait
my argument? Yeah.
because it'll add a sense of urgency to my response.
Yeah. So, my basic argument about the crucifixion is that the church is continually trying to make meaning out of it. Continually trying. So there's a whole pile of them. Like there's some of the major ones, and there's a pile of minor ones. Everyone's trying to fit it into a system of rationality, make it make sense, make it ethical, make it wisdom. My big thing is, and I'm with Kierkegaard here, is that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
No. Let me put it another way.
Yeah.
Kierkegaard is with me here. Yes. With what he does with Abraham and Isaac, but is it actually one of the most interesting things about Abraham and Isaac, which is the founding text of the Islamic, the Jewish, and the Christian traditions, is it cannot be domesticated into an ethical or a wisdom frame. It's doing something else. And in the same way, I think the most interesting thing about the cross is how it disrupts our understanding of ethics and wisdom. And it's like the Shoah. It's like if anybody tries to put the Holocaust into a rational system and say, oh, it happened because the Jewish people sinned, or it happened as a test, or it happened to purify the people, or whatever explanation you give for it, it's a fundamental offense. It offends. What it does is it actually acts as this rupture of the ethical and the wisdom traditions. And and I would go, why do I think that's so important? We could talk about that, but ultimately that's ultimately how I think the crucifixion is operating as a thorn in the flesh. So there will be a million explanations to try to make it make sense. But what's interesting to me is the crucifixion kind of offends us.
Yeah, I think since you've so thoroughly read my book.
I read the first page. And I read the page where you give your argument.
And you read the page where I referred to you.
Just to see if it was as bad as I thought it would be. And it was better than I expected.
Your own quotes in there?
My own quotes, yeah. But it's actually very well written.
What's it called? Did God kill Jesus?
Jesus, yeah.
Searching for Love in History's Most Famous Execution. You probably hate that subtitle, I'm sure. Look, I think that, because you've read the book. I spent a great deal of time on the Binding of Isaac and on Kierkegaard's read of that text and of many of the
mystery
of the and of many of the midrashic interpretations of that text in the book, and that I also I very much agree with you in that the potency of the crucifixion is its existential pull on each of us as human beings.
And by the way, this puts me in line very quickly with René Girard, because I think René Girard say that what it exposes the sacrificial system.
It exposes the bankruptcy of the sacrificial system, which I spend a lot of time on in the book of Girard. And the crucifixion, though, I mean, I just think it's a bit idealistic to think that we could let the event just be the event. Because what human beings do with events that have happened in the space-time continuum is we try to make meaning out of events. And I know you don't want us to, but we do.
I just follow Jesus. And he doesn't want us to. but that's
he
what
was dead.
Disrupt.
So he
disrupt.
you know what I'm saying? Like
I say treat it more like a dream. Treat it more like a dream. If you go into therapy with a dream, you don't.
I just saw your face. So it's like, I'm having a nightmare.
You take it absolutely seriously. You don't kind of go, oh, it's disgusting, it makes sense. But you go like, what do these elements tell you about yourself? This is telling you something about your deepest desires, your deepest fears, your deepest wishes, right? So if this is a communal dream, this narrative is real to a community of people. What does it tell us about our desires, our dreams, our fears? It tells us about sacrificial systems, the bankruptcy of sacrificial systems, our desires to kill transcendence, all of these things.
It also tells us something about the nature. If you believe in God, it tells us something about the nature of God. And you and I both love Paul.
Yeah, I'm a big Paulinian.
Right? We're both Paulinians. Mm-hmm. We're Paulophiles.
Yeah.
Not Paulophiles. Paulophiles.
I don't want to say yes to that. I don't want to say yes to. Okay, yeah. Paulophile.
Paul looked to the crucifixion of Jesus to make meaning of everything that he had lived in and then rejected, but not totally rejected. So I'm just saying, be a little easier on human beings who try to find meaning in what Christians claim to be the single most important event in cosmic history.
I appreciate it.
I know you read the section of my new book where I gave you a hard time. I was trying to talk so Tony could go to the bathroom.
I really am.
Did you give me a hard time in your book?
Your favorite? I was really talking because he said he had to go to the bathroom.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'm interested. I want you because people always say, "Oh, you and Tripp."
That's what week 5 of your thing is.
We ever disagree. I mean, we do disagree.
Oh,
but
this
we'll
was a
talk
big
about it.
disagreement. Number one,
I want to hear this.
when we talk about the Christ event, it's not about Jesus anyway. So if you just go through the New Testament, including Paul and the Gospel of Mark, the referent is not what Jesus' existential experience you can rightly articulate. It's just that's not why it's a gospel. It was always what God has said, done, and revealed in the experience itself. So when Tony tries to debate you on this thing, you'll win because you're talking about Jesus. It's not a gospel because it's about Jesus. It's because it's God's self-testimony. So the grammar of the resurrection is it's the one who was raised.
Metaphysics to kind of agree.
No.
It's
This is
like
Irenaeus. This is like
Oh, then it's definitely right. I bet you Irenaeus said some terrible things about something they all did. You know?
Oh well.
What was his views on Jews?
Irenaeus was good on Jews.
Was he okay?
Yes.
Women?
I'd have to think. It was Tertullian that became a monetist. So
One of the topics that changed.
he's trying to distract me.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that if it's all and this is what Badu and Zizek do is they make death the place of resurrection. And you do it in your book, and we'll find out week 5 when I reread your
he's
book.
going to be a guest
Before I tell you how you're wrong, is that the place of resurrection was in the narratives, the resurrection narratives in Paul is not the cross. Badu, and then Zizek picks it up. It's very clear that to keep it to the grammar of faith to not include God and it not be a divine action, then it's the cross is the place the event happens. And so I think
I'm not
like
as atheistic as them.
no, I'm just saying like this is why I think Tony would get frustrated because the if you're just talking about Jesus' existential experience, you're right. It's just that's not why anyone talks about it, right? Like no one goes, oh, someone was abandoned by all their friends and left out to dry and suffered and died. I just going to have to go tell everyone about it because this is great.
I'm very orthodox. I don't know what Bart thought about the cross, but like when I have read the Epistle to the Romans and stuff, and it's God's knows kind of, or like it's a rupture. I mean, it's a rupture of religion. So I think it's very orthodox to actually articulate the view that I'm articulating from even a theistic, traditional orthodox position.
I'm just saying that the grammar of the resurrection is about God. It's not about Jesus. It's that the cross dead Jesus was raised. And the place of resurrection is not the cross, it's death. So like either way you talk about it, either the descent into hell or the burial or whatever, is because what's being addressed is God's relationship to non-being in whatever way you talk about. This is even volume 2, Paul Tillich's Systematic Theology. What's addressed in the Christ event is non-being, not our relationship to it. Now, I was told that he changes his mind later, and I'm sure he changed his mind to be a Rollinsian.
No, he didn't. Supposedly, Paul Tillich died having an argument with Thomas Altizer. Altizer says this because Altizer was saying, you are not taking the implications of your own theology seriously.
When you die, and Tony makes a story of your last conversation, what would you like it to be?
Yeah. So I died and he's still alive?
Yeah.
He's older than me.
I'm going to outlive you.
Younger than me?
We have the same birthday.
We do, 31st of March.
With Renee Descartes.
Oh,
Three of
that's
us.
right. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And by the way, he gets gifts because he does this. Did you tell him, like when you do podcasts, you get gifts? I don't know why it's
People send in beer and cigars and all sorts of stuff.
So on our birthday, the 31st of March,
yeah,
I'm just saying a few cigars would be really nice.
Great. Look at all the thumbs up, the high fives we're getting.
Oh, yeah. And a couple of
and you can mail
a nice bottle of gin.
Here to the hatchery. I'll make sure to get it to them.
Yeah. I'm very jealous. I would be in the house where I lived with Tripp for a while, and he would just get a big package of like 30 cigars. Somebody even bought him. I mean, this is a bit of an aside, but like a subscription to a clothing thing that every month they send you.
I got my sweet shirt.
So yeah, that's why he's starting to look less like an idiot because he's like he's getting proper clothes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it started after you mocked me regularly through that whole high gravity class. You're like, I used to think you just didn't get dressed when we hung out. Then I found out all you do is have printed T-shirts and the same pair of jeans.
All he wears is like free T-shirts he's got from some brewery. That's it, you know. So that's somebody bought. I mean, people are very nice to you. I mean, I've been lucky as well, but
I was about to say, so if we were going to get up the
Shall we go?
no,
Shall we?
what was
No,
he was
we
talking?
probably
very,
should-
I'd
should
be
we?
very, very.
He was talking about the troubles. I think he was talking about the troubles.
Always goes back to the troubles.
Always go back to the
No,
troubles.
I was trying to change the subject for
Oh,
you again.
like, well, no, I did. I mean, I've been kind of generosity of people. That's what I've lived on, just generosity of people. So I know you don't have to send me cigars. There you go. There you go.
That was real sweet. All right. So, a last question was, someone actually. So this is actually interesting. Like, how do you see the impact of 9/11 shaping our continued religious discourse? And I actually was thinking about it just like in the process of having to write stories about myself in the Jesus book, and not just,
So Tripp wrote a book that I edited. It's the first in a 10-book series from Homebrew Christianity and Theology for the People at Fortress Press. And you're all welcome to buy. You can buy the whole series for $110, and you get every book when it comes out. You get a coaster, and you get a free high gravity class. What else do you get?
And the sticker.
And a sticker.
And
if you're ever in the same town with Tripp, you get a free beer.
yes,
And
that's true.
Photos that
Oh, look at that! You got it.
Got it.
Well, I bought all this beer in here, so
I have it in.
So
just showing
it's a
the
great deal. They're going to be 10 fantastic books. I've already read 3 or 4 of them, but only one is coming out this fall. But Tripp wrote a really great introduction to Jesus that thinking people, I think, will be able, you know what I'm saying? Like, people who are skeptical, doubters, but thoughtful will find it intriguing, I think, because of course it's Tripp, but it's on paper instead of on audiological goodness.
Well, it was interesting. Like after I sent him the first chapter, he's like, "So, are you going to tell us anything about yourself, or tell stories or whatever?" And then when I started telling stories in the book, the Christology gets higher as you go through. So like Pete may even agree with the first 3 chapters. I have a argument.
And I agree with the final chapter.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
There's
something for everybody.
I even have a nice argument using Tatian of why you in radical theology should be accepted in all congregations if they want to be faithful to Scripture.
Why we should not be killed.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Whenever they're deciding whether or not to execute me, it's nice to know Tripp was like,
come
I
on.
think you should be allowed to live.
Because
Because
you would look good on a cross.
Well,
You kind of know it too, don't you?
no,
The hair would be.
I don't know if I'm ready to be a martyr quite yet. I'm enjoying LA too much.
Ah,
It's like terrible.
No
It's
martyrs
It's
in LA.
terrible.
You
for
know-
me.
did you
Terrible
know he
for me.
started running?
What?
No, I've started cycling.
No,
Oh, you go to spin
he used
classes?
to
Oh, I
say-
did start running.
he would put on these short shorts and he would go run. He's like, I'm going to get in shape running by running until I'm tired. And he would leave the house and come back 4 minutes later.
I was very quick. I was a very fast runner.
And I was like, you could briskly walk and he's like, no, I'm going to build up. So, 4
I
months
never
later,
built up.
4 months later, every day I would add on a couple minutes or so. I'm like, man, you did it 25 minutes today. And then,
Yeah, no, I was really bad. But I'm loving the LA lifestyle. You know, I'm feeling fitter. It's going to be terrible for me.
9/11.
Oh yeah.
So why I was saying is because I added all these stories,
Well, here's the-
and I realized that 9/11 was the primary shaper of the questions that provoked me theologically and shaped my answers all the way through. That if that hadn't happened, I would not have asked the questions I did, and I'd never observed that about myself. So I was forced to actually think of why, as a human, I would be interested in what I was interested in.
Here's my take on 9/11 vis-a-vis like religious identity in America. I'm actually surprised at how little effect 9/11 has had on the complexion of the United States and on our self-understanding. I think 9/11, in most people's consciences, is just one more tragedy in a litany of tragedies. There was another one last week where just, 12 people are killed at a community college. And there'll be another one next week where multiple people are killed in something or other. There will be. It's just now 3,000 people died on that day. And so numerically, of course, it's a great deal larger than, but the numbness we have to mass death in our country and abroad, I don't know. I don't know that it's had any effect on our religious identity.
For a war?
It's a justification for war, but there would have been another justification for war. There's multiple, there's never, no one's ever been slow to pull the trigger in the United States on going to war. So I mean, the religious identity in the United States, I think right now, stepping back a bit as a sociologist of religion and a practical theologian, I look at it, I really honestly think we are in the waning days of Christianity.
Well, do you think we would have Trump saying rather horrible things about Islam if there wasn't 9/11? I feel like it gives permission for our ugliness to come out that way.
Yeah, I agree. But I think even without 9/11, there would have been what's happening in the Arab world would have given Trump plenty of latitude to say everything that he said. But I mean, look, I think 9/11. I'm surprised that it didn't have more of an effect on who we. That's my perspective.
It was interesting. I noticed because I was on Twitter, after the shooting last week, and the identity of the shooter didn't come out immediately. And I was watching the hashtags, and so how many people were going, it's a Muslim shooter. It was and they're trying to hide it. They don't want to say it. I was like, I don't know how to interpret that. I was just watching it, going, whoa, what's that advice? That's a question that I don't feel I can answer. I remember where I was when it happened. I was in Belfast. I didn't live in America. It was well before that. And it felt like, it was for the whole world a huge event. And it sparked off, I think, a whole series of things, including war. But interestingly,
But religious identity, the question is about our religious identity, and I don't know. We were already on the track to be so polarized. When I think of my youth growing up, there was not this polarization between liberal mainline Christians and evangelical Christians. And I think that polarization was well on its way before 9/11. And maybe 9/11 reified it in some ways or something, because the way the two different kind of versions of American Protestantism responded to it. But in general, I just don't see how Christianity in America has much of a future. I think we're a dying breed, those of us who care about these kind of questions and think this is important stuff to talk about and think about. Sorry to bring everybody down.
Wait, I've got 2 questions to that.
Have we got time? Oh yeah. Oh no, comments. Even not even questions. Comments.
Yeah. Well, one is I think Tony is, how do you wish it would have impacted our religious identity? Because you seem very much into that. And second is, what do you say to the fact that a good chunk of Latinos were on the Time magazine cover a year ago for Latino evangelicalism as far as Pentecostalism? So there is still a big fueling force of faith that's coming from Asia and from Latin America. So to necessarily say it's the waning completely of Christianity, what do you say that in light of the fact that faith is coming from immigrants and in a very potent way?
I think that personally,
Sure.
I think that narrative is overplayed in the American media.
Sure.
That the Christianity in the global South is really going to affect. For many years, I said, stop. People would always say, oh, America, we're going the way of Europe. We're going secularism the way of Europe. And I said, no, America's not like Europe. That was a state church system that broke down because state church system is, invariably corrupt. And we're a system of a free market system of church life. I think right now, no, maybe we probably are going that way of Europe. I mean, you're probably the, most apt to speak on this, but I think more and more, I think that the secularism in America is accelerating in its velocity, very like doubling or tripling in speed every year, the number of people who are shedding faith. Some of this is based on what I read in, Pew surveys, which are very authoritative, and a lot of it's in my own personal anecdotal experience of my friends, and people are just like, they're just done. There's nothing there for them.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, although secularization theory has always had a bit of a trouble with America because it never seems to go the way they think it's going to go. And one of the things I've noticed, I can't talk too much about this, but if religiosity is partly defined by, kind of more in a Marxist way of offering an opiate to the people and offering kind of like a painkiller for the difficulties of self-alienation, et cetera, then strangely, living in LA, religion is alive and well in the drug culture, in Burning Man, in TED, and in new technologies. It's not in the church, but higher consciousness, mindfulness, say drug culture. These are kind of much more mainstream. These aren't even 60s things. It's not like 60s kind of cultish kind of groups. This is now in the mainstream, and it sounds a lot like the message of the church. It's just nobody believes the church anymore. They don't believe the church can give that, but they do believe ayahuasca can give that. They do believe that new technologies in the next 50 years will be able to give what religion can't give. And where religious promise is being made today, it's being made by the prophets of new technologies. And that's a whole interesting topic that Kester Bruin's kind of touching on in his next book. But I do see that in some respects, I've heard some higher consciousness people speak, and they talk a lot like traditional preachers, and they are being listened to, not by, as I say, not by hippies, but by kind of large swathes of people. It's like the new age for contemporary generation.
Well, and sociologically, there are just a few variables that if you can, they function to promote belief in the wisdom traditions or not. Like us getting somewhat universal health care changes the conditions for finding your identity in a religious group. Increasing relationship to pluralism, namely encountering public schools, decreases your belief. I mean, these are things that decrease your belief in the supernatural, which would require you to have a very sophisticated understanding of theology to still believe God. So like healthcare, pluralism, like where you become friends with someone and go to public school, women getting college degrees. The moment they get college degrees, you have less kids that stay. It took a long time for America to care if poor people got educated and healthcare and these types of things. So I think you could expect that, but those are sociological things. So to me, the question remains like, what does the wisdom tradition, speech tradition look like when we're no longer functioning for the safety rope of the gaps, essentially? Like if you said the God of the gaps, this is like the church was the safety net for not having health insurance. And
so are you saying you feel the burn?
I feel
you feel the burn, don't you?
Yeah, I love the burn. I hate it when it happens right before I start to talk, because
I don't know what that means.
You don't even know what we're talking about, Phil the Burn?
Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, baby.
And then I
know who he is. He's like presidential candidate.
In Europe, he'd be considered a conservative, but here he's a socialist.
I was no left in America.
I was thinking of like just
he's a Jewish socialist, but in Europe he'd be like the Christian Democratic Party.
You know when you have like a bunch of jalapenos in your burrito in the morning, but then you're talking that night.
And you squirt a little in your pants when your parents introducing you.
Yeah, and then you feel the burn. All right, thank you for watching the podcast.
Hey, one apology, by the way. Just last time I was on Homebrew Christianity,
you insulted someone?
Yeah, Tripp brought up an atheist minister who got fired, and I assumed that it was a conservative church, and I assumed therefore it was some guy. Turns out it was Greta.
Yeah.
And so
it's a Canadian woman.
Yeah.
He's a Canadian one, yeah, and he looks really interesting. I've looked up in the last couple of days since it was pointed out to me, so I very much apologize to you for doing that. I'm really looking forward to reading your work, and interested in kind of finding out more about you. So apologize for thinking that it was some conservative, fundamentalist church, and that whatever.
You feel good now?
I feel good. I've confessed my sins.
Well,
And you have been absolved.
it took a whole 6 seconds for us to change directions, and when I saw someone on Twitter mention, I'm like, "What are you even talking about? I don't even remember talking about."
I know,
this.
but it was So,
Hey,
I just use it as an example. But
Do you know we've gotten up to 76 viewers? So
oh my goodness,
I mean, that's really
Let's
if
start a
every one
religion.
of them bought your book,
yeah,
that would double the sales for
drinks on me.
2015.
Yeah.
All right, bye.